This
Meeting of the
conference will
Bicycle
now
and
be
Pedestrian
recorded.
Advisory Committee to order. First, I need to read a statement. Due to the nature of the declaration of a state of emergency due to novel coronavirus pursuant to code 2.23708.2, this meeting is to be held by electronic communications via the web platform GoToMeeting. Catastrophic nature of this declared emergency makes it impracticable and unsafe to assemble a quorum in a single location, and the purpose of this meeting is to discuss or transact business statutorily required or necessary to continue operations of the public body. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to roll call. I believe Mr. Lehane, you were leading that.
Yes, thank you. I'm just going to go down the list and let me know that you're here. Make sure to unmute your mics and mute back when you are finished. Craig Pennington, Caroline County. Brian Googe, Stafford County.
Here.
Chris Clark, King George County.
Present.
Jamie Jackson, City of Fredericksburg.
Present.
Jacob Pastowick, Spotsylvania County.
Present, thank you.
Linda Lasut, VDOT. Joy Himes, PRTC. Ben Matters, PRTC. Kristen Talkin Spalding, National Park Service, or Kirsten, sorry.
Here. Yep, all good. Thank you. Here.
Lee Anderson, GDB Ride Connect.
I am here. Thank you.
Adam Lynch, Friends of the Rappahannock.
Present.
Deborah Foltz, Disability Resource Center. Deborah Lately, Disability Resource Center. Rob Maple, Fredericksburg Trails Alliance.
Present.
Jim Lynch, Potomac Heritage Trail Association, and Friends of the Dahlgren Railroad Heritage Trail.
Yes, I am here.
John Summer, Fredericksburg Cyclist Club. Stan Huey, Virginia Bicycle Federation and the Spotsylvania Greenway Initiative. Brantley Tyndall, Virginia Bicycle Federation. And then citizen representatives, Kevin Whiteman, Caroline County. Kristen Harding, Spotsylvania County.
Present.
Stephen Littlewood, Stafford County.
Here.
Yamina Jordan, Stafford County.
Here.
And John Leisher, at large. Okay. Thank you. That is everyone.
It's Debbie Foltz at the Disability Resource Center. Sorry, my settings weren't set so I could talk.
Awesome. I got you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lehane. Moving on to agenda item number 3, approval of the April 1st, 2021 meeting agenda. Are there any comments on the agenda? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to approve.
Chris Clark, King George County, move to accept the agenda as presented.
Jacob Pastowick, second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, that is approved. We will move on to agenda item number 4, which is approval of the February 4th, 2021 BPAC meeting minutes. Has anyone reviewed, and do you have comments on the meeting minutes?
Mr. Matthew, this is M. Lynch. I had a couple of comments that I emailed in. I don't know if you want me to review those orally. I can.
I do have those comments. You're welcome to go through them though.
Okay. Let's see. Number one comment: we had a number of attendees at the last meeting. I think they were listed in the minutes as other attendees. I think it would be helpful if their affiliation was indicated, so we have an idea of who they are. And the other comment I had was on the comment that I had made about an Angeles Angels activity on the railroad trail. It was noted that it was a race. It wasn't actually a race. It was a unrun as opposed to a race. So those are the only changes I would recommend.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Does anyone else have any changes to the minutes?
Mr. Chair, if I may, this is Carrie Barber. My apologies. I forgot to include them in the packet this month. They are available on the Bike Ped Committee website, and I will be emailing all of them out to all of you after this meeting, so we can take comments on them via email after this meeting.
Thank you, Carrie.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any other comments for those of you who have had a chance to review the minutes? Okay. Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes with the changes suggested by Mr. Lynch?
Kirsten Talkin-Spalding, so moved.
Lee Anderson, I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Jamie Jackson with the City of Fredericksburg. I abstained since I was not at the meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. That motion carries. So we will move on to item number 5, public comments. If there are any comments and questions from members of the public who are in attendance, they are welcome at this time. Just as a reminder, this will be the only opportunity for members of the public to speak during the meeting unless they are called upon to speak by one of the committee members. Is there anyone who would like to speak? All right, hearing none, we'll move to item number 6, administrator report by Mr. Olis.
Thanks very much, Brian. Good evening, everybody. It's great to be with you all again. Just to introduce this report, bearing in mind we do have each time 2 policy committee meetings between BPAC meetings. So the attempt of this report is not to rehash every single thing that went on in the policy committee and all of my presentation slides, because it would make your meeting unbearably long. So what we do is typically I try to collate slides from multiple reports that have happened at the policy committee meetings, and to give you just a summary so you get a flavor. If you weren't able to attend the policy committee, you get a flavor for what has happened. So that's what you have in your pack and which you'll see on the slides tonight. So if we can move on to the next slide. So we're looking at federal funding, where that is at, a transportation overview, and an office update. Next slide. So there are a couple of things going on. I think you would all be aware of the public announcement by the Governor of Virginia, the new Federal Secretary for Transportation, and a number of other officials about the work that's happening in Virginia in terms of upgrading the rail system. But there are a couple of things happening in Congress currently. There's a transportation reauthorization bill that's working its way through the committees and party delegations in Congress. We've got a financial year 22 THUD bill, which is currently in the Appropriations Committee. And there's a high-speed rail bill which has been proposed. And in fact, it appears there might even be different versions of a high-speed rail bill that are in Congress. So those things will be authorizing finance for all kinds of projects, that some of which will occur in Virginia. Next. The census, they're just the dates of where we're expecting to get results from the census published by the Census Bureau. You can see the 4th of May, the 27th of May, the 17th of June are important dates, and we will be getting demographic data from the Census Bureau as to how our population has grown, changed, and so on those various dates. Next. This is a rather more important slide, and I would urge everybody to pay attention to this. The Census Bureau is proposing changes to the criteria for defining what an urban area is. And some of the proposals contained in this particular document may affect the FAMPO region. I'll give you one example. Previously, they tried to draw fairly straight lines around what was to be defined as an urban area. They're no longer going to be doing that. They want to cut out all the areas of very low density within a larger urban area. So the map of what constitutes an urban area is going to look like a squiggly jellyfish in future. They're going to attempt to not include areas of low density in the map. That's the proposal. There are a number of other proposals like that which would change what defines an urban area in the United States. The link is on there. I would urge you to look at that and to send in your public comments, because they have called for public comment on these proposals, and they want that comment by May the 20th. Personally, I have some concerns about some of those proposals because it's going to shrink some of the urban areas in the US. And of course, the size of your urban area often has an effect on what funding is available to your area. So I think that's a very important thing to note. And I've shared this with the policy committee. I'm also sharing with yourself. Please encourage your county representatives or your city representatives to look at this and to send in comments from your jurisdictions. I think that's quite important. Next slide. Major road crossings. I shared this 2 policy committees ago, and there's some road crossings in our area which I think are dangerous for pedestrians and bicyclists, and there are a couple that I've shown there. This is Carl D. Silver Parkway. There's a great sidewalk on both aspects, but there just isn't a crosswalk to get across the road. Next. This is if you're crossing from the Spotsylvania town center to the Central Park area, you can see those are the kinds of intersections that we have where there is absolutely no way to cross. And it would be quite dangerous to cross there on foot. I've done it. My first month at FAMPO, I didn't have a car, and I was using my bicycle, and I was using Uber and Lyft, and I was walking, and I had to walk across to get to a different store on the other side of the road, and it's a difficult thing to do. Next. This is the 2 different points in near the Leland Road in Stafford. The one on the left is the train station parking lot access. On the other side of Leland Road, there is a sidewalk, but there's no way to cross safely. And at the intersection of Deacon and Leland Road, also, there's similarly dangerous intersections for pedestrians and cyclists right now. Next. So I've discussed this with VDOT and got some responses to those subsequent to that policy committee meeting. The Caldy Silver Parkway intersection, they're leaving that to the city because it's within the city limits, and the city's public works department would have to deal with whether or not they wanted a crosswalk and paint one or get that going. The Route 3, this is the interesting one. VDOT have hired a consultant to review the pedestrian crossings along Route 3 corridor. Subsequent to us discussing it at the FAMPA Policy Committee, you'll have seen the article in the newspaper where the journalist was watching our committee, I believe, and then went and did some research and published a whole story in the local Freelance Star about the study that's being done to improve those pedestrian crossings. Leland Road 1, VDOT could work with Stafford County if they want to install this under a permit, but there may or may not be funding currently available. But Spotsylvania, sorry, that's an error. That should be Stafford. That's a Stafford. Sorry, I beg your pardon. There's an error on that slide for some reason. And then the last one, VDOT is looking at the Leland and Deacon Road intersection to put a crossing on the eastern side of that intersection. So we are going to get some progress on some of these, which is fantastic. Next. Rail. We spoke previously about connecting the proposal by the Greater Washington Partnership to connect the MARC train system with the VRE train system and have through running of trains between Maryland and Virginia. Well, Maryland has since taken action and they've passed House Bill 1236 to empower MARC trains to negotiate with VRE and CSX to travel into Virginia. So they've taken the first step, and you saw the announcement by Virginia and the Federal Secretary for Transportation this past week. And I was asked either in the last BPAC meeting or the CTAC meeting, practically how would we do that? The answer is that locomotive down there, that particular one's made by Bombardier and it's used in the New Jersey transit system, but it's a dual diesel and electric locomotive, which means that it can operate where there are electrical wires called catenary over the train line, and it can operate in areas where there aren't. So it would solve the technical problems of having trains run through both areas. Next. Just to tell you that those are the federally designated corridors for freight in Virginia, and they are designated as critical corridors. We have had an announcement of proposed additional critical freight corridors that are more regional in nature in Virginia by OIP. However, having had a look at them, none of them are in the Fredericksburg area or the FAMPO area. They're typically to the north of us or to the south of us. Next. Fred Transit, some really good news, and I see Jamie Jackson's online. I just want to lend our support and encouragement to Fred Transit. The proposals that Jamie and their board or their team have tabled for consideration is to start Fred buses an hour earlier, and you'll see there which buses and which times. That's fantastic. You'll be able to catch a bus at 6:30 in the morning or 7:30 in the morning to get to work, whereas in the past you'd have to wait for a later bus, and that might not get you to work on time if you travel to work, particularly as COVID lifts. It's great to see that there's a proposal to give us earlier buses for people who need to get to work on a bus. The next slide. Also, Fred, these are extended hours on the weekend for Saturday service, and that's also great. You have extended hours of a bus available for you to use on the weekends, on Saturdays, if you want to do some shopping and so on. Also, I think a fantastic initiative by Fred. Next slide. Looking at the way forward, there are a number of things that I've been proposing to the policy committee. Next. An east-west mobility study. We've applied for funding to DRPT for a transit study and bike ped study in terms of east-west mobility in our region, to be followed later by a study of roadways and the east-west mobility on roadways in our region. And we're waiting to hear whether that approval for the funding will be given to us to carry out that study. Our broad mobility and accessibility study, I initially intended that as a standalone survey, but we've decided to combine it with a survey that our colleague Stacey is doing for the LRTP 2050. So we're going to do one combined survey to not constantly pester the public for spending time completing surveys. We've begun the search for new freight movement optimization study funding. If we get that funding, I'd like to look at freight. Many of you will have seen some accidents on the I-95 recently that led to blocking of the entire freeway, and that's raised the attention of many people to how much freight is moving through our region. And that freight, of course, affects things like congestion as well. And then finally, we started a discussion between Spotsylvania and Fredericksburg and ourselves on the VCR right-of-way and what could be done to join the various missing blocks that could see a continuous trail, bike and ped path from Fredericksburg all the way out to the other side of Spotsylvania. And some projects in the pipeline, others not begun yet, and we need to find ways to get that going. So we've started work on that. Next slide. That's all from me. Thank you, Chairman. I'll take any questions if you have any. Otherwise, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Olis. One comment I had was on the Leland Road improvement item.
Yes.
There is a project for that to extend actually a shared use path, I believe, between Deacon Road and the Leland VRE station along Leland Road.
Well, that would certainly be fantastic. I'm not sure of the details. I do believe that VDOT has indicated that they have a study to develop that in that area that is ongoing, and that they're committed to finishing work that they have started in the area. So I'm not sure of the details. You probably know more than I do.
Okay. There is there's a project page for it on VDOT's site, but you know, I don't know the specifics. I just looked at it. It looks like maybe construction starting next year and completion by 2023, according to the latest information on their site.
Great.
But I don't know if there's been any updates since then. Also, that 7-Eleven there at the intersection is going to be rebuilt soon. And as part of the conditional use permit process they had to go through, and they had to rezone a small parcel, they proffered to construct shared use paths along the frontage. And that's both on Leland and Deacon Road. I don't think there were any crosswalks incorporated with that, but I'd have to look back at the project to verify.
Yeah, VDOT indicated to me that on the eastern side, they would be including one crosswalk in the project that they have in mind to develop in the area. So it won't get crosswalks on all four sides of the intersection, but at least on the eastern side, they intend to build crosswalks there. Any other questions? Otherwise, I will log off my mic so that you don't have background noise. All done? Great. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. All right, moving on to agenda item number 7, discussion and action items. First item in that section was member introductions. So I thought with the new members that we have, it would be good to just quickly go around and have everybody, you know, just do an introduction of yourself, maybe talk a little bit about the organization you're with and your position in the organization, you know, interest in bike pet activities and that sort of thing. So with that, I'll start off. Brian Googe of Stafford County. I'm in the Planning and Zoning Department. Initially, when I started about 4 years ago, I was in the Long Range Division, so we were working on the comp plan and rezonings and things like that. So at that time, I got involved in bike ped planning. It was about 3 years ago, and I was introduced to this committee, and it was while I was working on updating Stafford's bicycle pedestrian facilities plan. So that was my introduction to this group. But since then, I've changed sections. I'm still in planning and zoning, but I'm now managing the development review division. So maybe less exciting stuff. We're reviewing site plans and construction plans and plats and things like that. But I am still involved in bike ped planning, obviously, since I'm here. So, but from a personal side, I do enjoy walking and cycling. I'm more of a casual cyclist, riding around the neighborhoods and things like that. I do have 2 young children who love to take their bikes out. So on the nice days, we're usually riding around the neighborhood and wishing there were more trails and stuff around. So, that's part of why I'm here, is try to make cycling and pedestrian activity hopefully a little more accessible to people. Mr. Lehane, could you just go around and kind of call everybody out, and we'll do it that way?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
I'll just go down the list. Chris Clark.
Chris Clark. I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation for King George County, and discovered by accident that we did not have a staff representative on this committee, and half volunteered, half voluntold to join up and make sure that King George was getting our citizens represented with BPAC.
Jamie Jackson.
Good evening, everyone. Jamie Jackson. I'm the Director of Transit and Transportation for the City of Fredericksburg. I am replacing Eric Nelson, who retired recently on this committee. So I'm getting up to speed on our projects and look forward to moving forward in assisting with these projects.
Jacob Pastowick.
Good evening, everyone. It's Jacob Pastwick. I'm with Spotsylvania County Planning Department. I've been with Spotsylvania County since 2007, and I work as a long-range planner for the county. I was the case manager of the original 2011-12 adopted Trailways Master Plan for Spotsylvania County, and I've continued on with that effort through a recent update where we collapsed that plan into the comprehensive plan as an element of the comprehensive plan. And I've just been, ongoing with BPAC for many years and working with our transportation and parks and recreation staff to try to help implement our Trailways plan and work within this regional effort. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Linda Lasut.
Everyone. I work with Stephen Haynes at VDOT for the Fredericksburg district. I'm his assistant manager for transportation. But I've been in the city in this area for about 5 years, but I have 25 years of doing transportation planning, mostly at MPOs, but I did do consulting work, and I was a TDM manager for various rideshare and van pools and transit and high-speed rail type things for a number of years, director of an MPO in Texas. But I'm a longtime advocate for, and I like to walk and bike, but I've been doing more kayaking lately. So, but that's about it.
Kirsten Talkin Spalding.
Yes, good evening. My name is Kirsten Talkin-Spalding. I'm with the National Park Service. I'm the superintendent of Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania National Military Park. We cover just about all of the different areas that are within the BPAC. Sans probably King George, but even out there, we've got National Park Service lands. National parks are, as you guys know, very much into creating safe routes, not just in the parks, but also we really have more recently been concentrating on safe routes from the communities around us into the parks to be able to use them. We've also had for years now the Healthy Parks, Healthy People initiative, which utilizes the idea that you know, what we're finding with COVID, right? Everybody is realizing being outdoors is the place to be. And so we're really seeing an uptick of use on our lands, especially as we have fewer and fewer open lands around us. Our National Park Service, our municipal and our state open lands have really become incredibly important. So we're working to figure out how to best balance the local users and their activities that they want to be able to do on the lands, and for like our national park areas, those folks that are coming from out of state, out of country even, to visit our national park areas, and how to balance those competing needs. Part of the interest here. But then personally, I don't know that I would have survived COVID and everything that's been going on without the trails that we have around us, and being able to bike and hike and that sort of thing. So I also have a personal interest as well. Thanks.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Matthew. So I represent GW Ride Connect, and we are the free ride-sharing service for our region. We try to connect people with solutions other than driving alone, which of course includes bike and walking. We do champion all forms of transit that are not a single occupancy vehicle, to include kayaking and ferries, biking, walking, everything. We also run the Advantage Self-Insurance Program for the state of Virginia, which helps insure van pools. And hopefully the van pools will get more single occupancy vehicles off the road to help share the road with bikers and walkers and all of that. Thank you.
Adam Lynch.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, so I'm Adam with Friends of the Rappahannock. We're a nonprofit river conservation organization based in Fredericksburg and working across the 18 counties of the Rappahannock watershed. So there's a couple reasons why I'm on this particular group. One of those is that trails are a great way to get our local citizens and residents closer to our river in an environmentally sensitive way. And the other is that if we're going to create a river-friendly world, we can't continue to build our society around the automobile. Personal vehicles are an absolutely destructive force to water quality. So we need to start structuring our world around public transportation, active transport, pedestrian, and human-centered development. Thanks, guys.
Deborah Foltz. I believe she was having audio issues earlier, but we'll move on. Rob Maple.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Rob Maple here from the Fredericksburg Trails Alliance. We're a nonprofit organization, and through an MOU with the city of Fredericksburg, we manage the trails, the natural surface trails within Fredericksburg, namely the Quarry Trails and Mott's Run Reservoir Trails. Our mission is to, of course, open up more trails, maintain the ones we have, and of course, create trails that are for all skill types, ages, and skill sets. So definitely have a lot of good news coming soon, but yeah, we're ready to have some fun in 2021. Thanks a lot.
Kristen Harden.
Good evening. I'm Kristen Harding, the Spotsylvania County resident representative. I've lived in Spotsylvania County almost my entire life, so about 30 years, and now I'm a mom in Spotsylvania County, and I got involved with BPAC a little over a year ago because really I didn't see a lot of opportunities for pedestrian transportation in our area. I live in the Courthouse Road area, and it is hard to walk places, and we like to be outside and moving. So I wanted to get engaged and involved in maybe impacting some change in that area.
Stephen Littlewood.
Good afternoon, everybody. Stephen Littlewood. I am a Stafford citizen representative. I just got voted on, but unfortunately the day after the last meeting. I am a retired Marine intelligence officer and prior geospatial intelligence analyst. And I decided with my family that we wanted to stay in Stafford because we love the area and the parks, the national parks, city and county parks in this area. So we decided to stay here. Started my own business, which I'm a running and nutrition coach, trying to build a better community and get people more active. And that's sort of what led me to BPAC as I'm trying to train clients or just going out for my own training here in Stafford is probably one of the most unsafe areas for pedestrians that I've lived in, especially if you live further out west of 610. I constantly see students walking alongside of 610 to high school and trying to cross the road in the morning, fighting morning traffic. And I wanted to join to see if I could make a difference and get involved with local government to try and make both Stafford and the Fredericksburg area and access to parks and other areas a little bit safer for people that want to get out, get healthy, and then also try to connect some of the lower income housing areas to commercial areas because without easy access to transportation or walking and bicycling path, that also hinders their own economical development, job searching, and just general transportation. So that's why I decided to put my application in and join this organization.
Yamina Jordan.
Hi everybody. I am the alternate citizens representative for Stafford. So I originally had emailed the Board of Supervisors for Stafford County because I genuinely have been wanting to give back to this community since arriving to it from the time I landed. And with that said, I have a background in real estate. I have worked at a real estate investment trust. My family also owned a real estate company where I did property management and did a lot of coordinating. Also, I've talked to multiple real estate developers. In particular, there's a gentleman in Baltimore I just talked to about affordable housing. And back in 2000, I think it was 2018, I presented an affordable housing complex idea to Southern California Association of Governments. And I'm from Southern California, born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but I was raised in California, and I witnessed a lot of transportation-related things happen that 50 years down the line, we start to wonder, what would I do had I known now back then, had I known now what I knew back then, or something. I think it's the other way around, but had I known back then what I know now, what would I have done differently? And so that's what I'm here for. First priority for me is safety. I've talked to the first lieutenant and first sergeant of the Stafford Police Department to talk about how we can avoid crime coming into our park areas and to our walking and bicycle and micromobility areas, and also just in general the landscape for crime, to keep Stafford a safe community where children can grow and play and Secondly, to also preserve the land in the midst of this hyper growth that we're going through in this beautiful county that is so scenic and has so much nature, to make sure that 50 years from now our children have a place to grow and play, and that it's not bought out by real estate developers, which every citizen I've talked to says that's the common mutual problem, is hyper growth, and being able to preserve the nature that exists for enjoyment and also living. So that's that. All of that said, I wrote a letter to a lengthy email to the Stafford Board of Supervisors requesting that I could be of any help in any way to this community. And I feel so pleased and so excited, so proud and excited at the fact that I was selected to be an alternate citizens representative, representing the common interests for people who are in using micromobility machines, and also all the categories under BPAC and bicycle and walkways, and even assisting with commutes to hospitals like Mary Washington and Fred Bus. So I've got a lot of ideas. I love brainstorming. If anyone's interested in brainstorming with me, I am so excited to be here, and you know, the sky's the limit. So I thank you for letting me talk, and I'll pass it on now.
John Leisher. All right, I believe that is the end of my list. Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone for that. Next item is the draft 2050 LRTP bicycle and pedestrian project prioritization. That's a lot of P's. We'll turn it over to Ms. Barber for that.
Good evening, everyone. You're right, that is a lot of P's. So this is our draft prioritization methodology. Next slide. So as you know, our 2050 LRTP update is coming up, and we've been working on a prioritization method for each one of our modes. And this is going to be our bicycle and pedestrian mode, and you are the first folks that get to hear about it, being BPAC. So we're coming up with a streamlined methodology. Our broad categories are the same with all of our modes, but within the categories, the measures are modified to better reflect bike and pedestrian. So we're integrating smart scale guidelines, and we're better coordinating with the state's transportation plan, known as VTrans. Next slide. We broadly follow the 6 Virginia Smart Scale scoring factors: safety, congestion mitigation, accessibility, environmental quality, economic development, and land use coordination. But we also add 2 more factors: statewide coordination and project benefit. And you can see that our weights, back one, there you go. Those of you who are familiar with Smart Scale may notice that our weights are different, and we've changed them up for bike peds so that they're more appropriate. Safety is 25% of the score because that we feel is more appropriate for vulnerable road users. Next slide. So safety. Safety is made up of 4 subcategories: separation, crashes, barriers and connections, and PSAP corridor, which I will explain in a couple of slides. So separation is 35%. That is the degree to which the project is separated from traffic. Is it a separate shared use path? Is it a bike lane separated by a concrete barrier or bollards? Or is it just separated by paint? That's going to determine how many points it gets in that category. Crashes is a smaller subcategory because it's simply the presence and number of crashes at that location. Is it a dangerous location? Barriers and connections is the degree to which the project connects to existing pieces of infrastructure and/or it provides a safe crossing of a barrier to cyclists and pedestrians. So does it cross a dangerous street, or does it connect to pieces of infrastructure that we already have? And the last one of these is it located on a pedestrian safety action plan corridor, or will it benefit one of these corridors? Next slide. So this is just two maps that show you FAMPO region crashes for pedestrians and cyclists between 2013 and 2020. And as you can see, they're concentrated, of course, mainly in the Fredericksburg area, but it gives you an idea of where projects might be located that would get more points because they're located in more dangerous areas. Next slide. So this explains what PSAP is. The Virginia Department of Transportation has formulated a methodology for prioritizing corridors and locations for improvements. They rank the locations 1 to 3, and they give you, there are detailed maps provided for their highest priority locations, and they give recommendations for improvement. Next slide. So their criteria, their highest criteria is the daily traffic on the corridor, the presence of households that don't have a car, transit access, and something called the Health Opportunity Index, which is basically the relative health of the community, access to health care, places to exercise, presence of pollution, things like that. Their medium factors are roadway geometry, how curvy it is, line of sight, employment density, proximity to a school, and the speed limit. They give lower weight to factors such as the crash history, proximity to a park, population density, and an urban-rural context. They used to count alcohol-related crashes and the population below the poverty line, but they found that it didn't really correlate to risk, so they took that out. Next slide. So this is just an example of their PSAP corridors. This is for Fredericksburg, but they do it for all the jurisdictions in Virginia. It's based on risk, pedestrian and cycle risk, actually, sorry, just pedestrian risk, and demand for pedestrian infrastructure. So while Fredericksburg City has no priority 1 corridors, they do have some top crash clusters there downtown, indicated by the stars. So if a project was located on one of these clusters, it would receive more points. Clusters or segments, it would receive more points. Next slide. So the next factor that we're using is congestion mitigation. Now, traveling by bike or walking isn't going to create a huge shift in congestion because it's just not going to happen at a large enough scale to do that. So what we're using instead is, does the project increase biking or walking as transportation rather than just as recreation? And if you'll notice in this picture, we want to create enough infrastructure so that our young commuters can get to work on time, like this fellow here in the picture. So, so it just has one factor, one subcategory that gets 100%. Is the project going to potentially increase biking and walking trips for daily activities and not just for recreation? Next slide. Our next one is accessibility at 15%. This one has 3 subcategories: activity centers, multimodal choices, and disadvantaged populations. The first one is how many community activity centers, park, school, government building, community center, can be accessed via the project. This speaks to whether you're going to be traveling on this project on a daily basis. Multimodal choices. Can you get to the bus stop? Can you get to the train station? Can you get to the park and ride lot from this project? It's going to get more points if you can. The third one, does the project provide a benefit or possibly a harm to an environmental justice census block group? That's explained on the next slide. Go ahead and move to the next slide. So an environmental justice group is one of these disadvantaged populations: African American, Asian American, Latino, Hispanic, low income, disabled over 5, over 65, or limited English speaking. And this map is from our 2045 LRTP, just an example of how we map these populations. So in this case, we will take the location of a project and use a number of factors to decide whether it's going to benefit that population. Next slide. So our next factor is economic development at 5%. We are going to determine the number of available Virginia Economic Development Partnership sites near the location of the proposed project, which can promote economic development. So these are sites that are considered development ready. This measures how much the project will contribute to economic opportunity in the near term. And that one gets much more weight in this category than the next one, local land use, determining the total square mileage of commercial and industrial zoning. So this speaks to zoning and measures how much the project will contribute to economic opportunity in the future. Commercial is, of course, much more applicable. Industrial is not very applicable to this, whereas it's much more applicable to freight and roadway. That's why it gets a smaller weight. Next slide. Land use coordination, 5%. It has 4 of them, and these are very self-explanatory. Current and future jobs and population. The project is going to get more points if more people live near it and they can get to more jobs. Next slide. So we have moved beyond the smart scale factors, and now we are moving to statewide coordination, which is 10% of our scoring. VTrans is Virginia's state long-range transportation plan, and we want to make sure that what we are doing coordinates with Virginia. So VTrans needs, does it meet a need? And these are all stated in the state's plan, that's 50%. And does the project occur on a priority non-motorized access corridor? Is another 50%. Next slide. So this is a map straight from VTrans midterm needs, and if you can see, it's a little small, but in purple, the purple parts are segments that are needed for bicycle access. So those are bicycle access improvement corridors. And nope, it's too small on my screen. That was pedestrian and bicycle access improvements, sorry. And then the blue is for bicycle access improvement. Thank you, Adam. So you can see that there are lots of corridors there that are priority according to the state. So if the project is on one of those corridors, it receives points for that. Next slide. Lastly is project benefit, and that receives 30%. So there are 4 parts to this. Was it recommended in a study? And does it align with the study recommendations? The second one, improvement impact. This one is more qualitative. Does the project achieve what it is trying to achieve? Are there inclusions of special project features that are particularly helpful? Does it have an overall benefit to the community? The third one, regional benefit. Does the project provide a regional benefit? Does it contribute significantly to intra-regional mobility? And the last one, meets strategic goals. This speaks to whether the project aligns with the goals and objectives outlined in our LRTP. All right, so this is very, very tiny on my screen. So this is our prioritization methodology scoring worksheet. And you can see the evaluation measure, the name, description, objective, the measure weight, overall weight, and scoring info. And this was in your packet, so hopefully you've had a chance to review it. But you can see, and this is, again, a draft. So what I would like you guys to do is go ahead and review review this and provide, if you'd like to provide comments before the TAC meeting on April 12th, I would like your comments by next Friday. But otherwise, I'll be taking comments all of April on these measures. And now I'm going to switch over to Matthew Lehane. He has run this methodology on some test projects to see how they come out. So he's going to go ahead and talk to you and show you how it came out.
Thank you, Carrie. So this will just be quick, really just a couple of notes. What we went through is we did the methodology on the selected projects here. I randomly went through our CLRP, Constrained Long Range Plan, and selected 4 projects from each jurisdiction of varying sizes, cost, and types. So we have sidewalk projects, bike ped projects, bridge projects, and projects of $100,000 up to $2-3 million. So really what we get here is we have somewhat of a variation in scoring, the highest being a 7.09, the lowest being a 5.32. What I think we'll see is for a couple of our sections, including the project benefit section, and I believe the environmental justice, which was earlier on, as Carrie mentioned, those were scored just a straight 5, since those require a good bit of work from FAMPO staff to actually score the projects and take a detailed look. So those are scored a straight 5 out of 10. So I think once we take a deeper dive into those projects, some of the score variations here will even out. We'll get projects that probably have a higher score of up to an 8, and projects that drop down to maybe a 4 or 5 instead of the only 2-point variation we have here. And I'm happy to take any questions about our methodology. The listing here, the SW through the PBW, are just our each of the sections that Carrie mentioned, and then we have the total LRTP score there on the right.
Hey, Carrie, this is Adam. So does VDOT not set these things for you? Like what sort of input are we able to give? I guess VDOT, or how sort of top down is this whole system?
So no, VDOT doesn't set this for us. This is for inclusion into our long range transportation plan. That's what this methodology is for.
Okay, I guess I was confusing this with the smart scale metrics that they use. Do we line up our scale system somewhat with the smart scale so that this system that your guys are talking about here will produce competitive smart scale applications?
That is part of what we're doing, yes, and
yeah.
that's why we're using some of their metrics in addition to making sure that we're coordinating well with the state and also giving ourselves enough room to qualitatively judge the projects for our own local and regional needs as well.
Okay, awesome. And just look at that list right there. That east-west bike boulevard, is that the one that's supposed to go along Sophia Street in downtown?
It is either that project or is Riverfront Corridor Connector. One of the projects goes from Fred Central down William Street into downtown, and the Riverfront Corridor Connector, I believe, would go from Sophia Street down to the VCR Trail. So yeah, I think it's Riverfront Corridor Connector.
Got it. All right. Thanks, guys. That's all I needed. Appreciate it.
This is Ian. If I just may make one comment, these are existing projects or previous projects which we just used as an example. So these are not the projects that we're going to have in the future. These are just previous projects that we used to test whether the metric gives us a good answer to the question of which projects should receive a higher priority. So it's important to do a test like this so that you don't have an unforeseen consequence to the new scoring methodology which we've developed. So this slide in particular shows you how these particular projects would score and how they would be ranked if we use this new methodology which we've developed and which we're showing you tonight. So we will continue to improve it over the next month before it is approved to make sure that everyone's had a chance to look at it and we've made some tweaks where it doesn't seem to give us the right answer that we're looking for, so that by the time we get to the new projects, we really have some sense of confidence that the methodology really is going to work, because it works on other projects that we've tested it on.
Yes, I have a question, if I may. Jim Lynch, can you talk a little bit about how the scoring is actually accomplished? Everything that you talked about here really looks good. I like all the criteria. I like in large. I like the sort of the way the scoring ranges have worked out. But
Yeah.
when you come right down to it, how is an individual project on an individual criteria? How is that score actually determined?
Yeah, so I'd be happy to give a quick example. Adam, if you want to zoom up to the previous PDF and just zoom in as far as you can to the safety measures, and you can just go over to the far right. That works. A little bit less, sorry. Yeah, perfect. So what we have here are some of our safety measures. For instance, the second measure down, so that would be SC2 that Adam is currently highlighting. What we're looking to here is analyze the number of bicycle and pedestrian crashes. I'm sure you remember that map that Carrie showed previously in the presentation.
Yes.
So basically what we do is we use some tools that we have to analyze the location of the project, and then analyze the number of crashes that are within a certain distance of that project. So in essence, how many pedestrian crashes are along the same project area. So if you have a certain section of Route 1, you're doing a sidewalk project, you would analyze how many pedestrian crashes are along that section of Route 1, and then add it up. Say there's 4 pedestrian crashes, as Adam's showing here under the scoring info. If it receives a 4, it would get an 8 out of 10, and so on for other projects.
Okay, good.
And that methodology is generally the same. Replace the objective and the scoring info for each of the sections here, but it's generally the same. Many of them are location based, or we have other items such as, Adam, if you could zoom down. Yeah, there we go. So we have other items such as project benefit section here, where it's not a location based measure that's just done by a tool. It is just a staff review using various items here that we have, and then we basically would write that up with written justification and score it out of 10, and provide that to the committee.
Okay.
May I ask a quick question? What happens if there are like 30 crashes out of 10?
Go ahead, Gary.
Clearly, that spot would be a high priority spot. That'd
be a real hot spot.
Yeah,
a real hot spot, right?
Yeah, I think.
But the highest score would still be 10.
Yeah, it would be a 10. However, I think what you will see is that score would also come out in other areas of our methodology,
yes,
such as the PSAP corridors,
exactly.
some of the written justifications, the project benefit. You will likely see that project receive a much higher score in those areas than other projects with less pedestrian crashes. If it's something so obvious as that, that's generally how our methodology would play out.
And do you have that accessible on the same Excel spreadsheet as the scoring info?
As in,
like a comparable table?
Yeah, so when we will provide the data and the written justification, we'll provide kind of the scores for everything for each of the sections.
All in one Excel spreadsheet, so it's all streamlined, so you can, go from the PSAP and what have you, and just look from scoring to scoring, from study to study. Okay, yeah. That'd be good comparative analysis. Thank you.
Hey, Carrie and Matthew, this is Adam. I think Brian Roberts has a question. So Brian, you can go ahead and unmute.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. My first time sitting through one of these meetings, I find it fascinating. I'm basically a highway safety guy. I work at the national level, and I'm not an expert on ped and bike, but I interact with that. So this is the thing that I'm kind of worried about on the scoring, and I might be getting in the weeds. And if I am, I can come back at your next meeting. We can talk about this later. But when we talk about safety, we often look at hotspots where the accidents all occur. But we also talk about something called systemic safety. And what that is that's often used in rural and local environments where we don't have the volumes that we normally have. And so you don't have accidents occurring at the same location, but what you have are the same conditions that cause accidents to occur. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but
it does.
Does it? Okay, thank you, Carrie. So it's a really important concept. And VDOT knows all about this. I mean, I've worked with many of the DOTs in the country, but they know about systemic safety, but it isn't necessarily applied to bike and ped. And it's very, very important. If we have those conditions at an intersection, at a trail, wherever it might be that we know leads to tragedies, to not accidents, crashes, deaths, we really need to address that. And my concern is the weighting factor is scaled to where all those accidents are occurring, but not where they are going to occur in the future eventually. So I'll shut up at that point.
Right. No, that is why crashes is only 15%. And the PSAP corridor, if you looked at the methodology for scoring PSAP corridors, it has a higher weight. And that takes into account risk. PSAP is scored according to risk, highway geometry,
Okay.
line of sight, AADT, and other factors that have to do with risk.
So PSAP would basically address a systemic approach. If we have all these problems somewhere, it's going to pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
And that's why it has a much higher weight than crashes.
Good. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Good question.
Hey, Carrie, this is Adam again. Did you guys use any sort of like pedestrian, I guess, counts to find places that are heavily trafficked by people on foot? My thought is someplace like Central's Caroline Street would be a good candidate for these kinds of projects, but it didn't score real high. I saw it only was a tier 3 in the original one of your metrics. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, let's see. So I think that the place that would come in would be like when Matthew was talking earlier about these scores are going to be different once we have done studies and when we have done the benefit section, that 30% project benefit, because we're going to be studying them more in depth when we're actually working on real projects.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any more questions?
All right. If there's no more questions, we'll move on to 7C, which is an update on streetlight data for the bike ped counter program, and that's Mr. Lahane's topic.
Thank you. So I know we have several new members, so I'll take this a little bit slow and try to explain everything to my best of my ability. But some of you did see a very similar presentation at the last meeting. So just a little bit of background. FAMPO has a bike and pedestrian counter through a company called EcoCounter that we can use to obtain what we term as hard counts along trails. So we place it along a trail, and it'll count the number of people walking by, and then export it to the eco counter system, where we can get the actual numbers. So you'll find on a website eco counter report from 2018, and that's basically what this program is. We're looking to do a little bit of updating to that through a platform called Streetlight Data. So Streetlight Data is an on-demand mobility analytics platform. Essentially what they do is they take big data from mobile devices. So they take anonymously your GPS data that you apt into to use from your phone. So Google Maps, any other apps that you use that take GPSs. And they take that data and funnel it through several algorithms and such to create analyses like zone and segment analyses. So you can basically, I can take a zone of downtown Fredericksburg and get the number of people who are passing through that zone during a certain time of day. So I could see that there might be more people there during a Saturday evening or Friday evening than a Monday morning. So it helps us get an understanding of the volume and the numbers of people passing through areas or going between certain areas, so we can get an understanding of where people are going to get to Central Park. If they're going to Central Park, where do they come from? Where in the Fredericksburg region do they come from to get there? So those are examples of certain types of analyses that we can do with Streetlight. But for this program, what we're looking to do is just do segment analyses of several of our trails and sidewalks and shared use paths in the region to attain an understanding of an estimate of the number of people who might be walking or biking on those trails. And it's important to note that these are not going to be exact numbers, and they aren't to be used to get an understanding of there's 700 people who walk there on this day versus 702 who walk there on the next day. More so, what we're looking to do with this data is do a comparative analysis between locations. So really, we're looking to use the Streetlight platform to attain comparative bicycle and pedestrian counts of certain locations in our region. So this can supplement current counting efforts or replace them. We're looking to kind of do a hybrid right now with the system. So we can use the Streetlight Index, which is the data term they have to analyze specific locations in the region. So, of course, compare the data between locations as mentioned, but also compare to the data by month, season, or year. So I could see that, and this is some analysis we have done, I can see that there was a lot more people walking and biking in 2020 because of COVID than there were in previous year of 2019. So next slide. So we've done several tests so far. Some of you might be familiar with this from the previous presentation. I selected several locations that are currently in our bicycle and pedestrian counting program that we have obtained hard counts from in the past, but we're looking to use these for calibration of the data, and I'll explain that in a minute. So locations tested, the Fredericksburg Canal Path at the Dog Park, Ferry Farm Trail, Mine Road, along Spotsylvania Parkway, and then a couple locations along the VCR Trail. So we have locations in each of the jurisdictions. And the location used for the calibrated counts was the canal path at the dog park. So the next slide. So the calibrated counts, essentially what a calibrated count is, it allows us to, for instance, on the left here, we have the data from the Streetlight Index at these locations, just as an overall number, an average daily number for 2018, 2019, and 2020. One note, the 2018 data is when they first started computing their bicycle and pedestrian data, so it's really not to be used for any sort of analysis, but we have it in there just as a general idea. So the Streetlight Index is Streetlight's number of how many people they think, based on their system, are walking through one of these trails or sidewalks or shared use paths. And then what we can do is we can do a calibrated count on the Streetlight Index. So I can input data from our eco counter hard counts. So for instance, in July of 2020 or January of 2021, July of 2020, we had 729 people. pass through the canal path at Dog Park on average on a daily basis. And then January, closer to 500 pass through on a daily basis. And we can take those counts and use those hard counts to calibrate the streetlight data, essentially. So it basically helps to get a better understanding, a closer estimate of what the counts were. So the numbers in red here, the July 2020 and January 2021 are more what we are looking at. And again, I'll mention we're not trying to use these to get an exact understanding of 600 people this day, 10 people this day, and whatnot. More so just a general understanding. Really what this is telling us is in July, there was a lot more people using the trails in January. Winter versus summer, COVID versus somewhat after COVID in a way. And we can also get an understanding of what trails do better than others. The canal path does a lot better than Ferry Farm Trail. Ferry Farm Trail does better than Mine Road and such. Next slide. So there are a couple of issues with this. The hard counts contain bicycle and pedestrian data. We don't necessarily have a great way of obtaining between the two. While the Streetlight Index contains only bicycle or only pedestrian data, it can cause small issues with the calibration. However, I don't see that as a major issue that will be a major flaw in our understanding here. I still think they're generally pretty accurate to give a general understanding of how many people might be passing through an area during a season, month, year, or by different locations. So next slide. So really what we're looking to do is expand upon this program, continue to use Streetlight calibrated counts and keep our current counter at the canal path, and use these calibrated counts along with other locations of interest in the Fampo region. So expand upon the current 6 that we have here, and get an understanding of more regional locations in other places in Stafford, Spotsylvania, and the city of Fredericksburg. That would be of interest to this committee of doing analyses on a meeting by meeting basis, doing a streetlight analysis to see there's more people traveling on the trails now than there were in previous meetings, or over several years, use the data to see trends. So really what we're looking to do is ask you all to kind of submit locations that might be of interest to you or your organizations that we could use for potential analyses in the future. Happy to take any questions. I know there could be quite a few on how Streetlight works, but happy to take any questions. And if you have any locations of interest that you'd like to submit to us, submit those to us sometime in April, hopefully by the end of April, so that we can get started on an understanding of bicycle and pedestrian in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Just curious, how much setup is involved to, set up one of these locations to study? Is it pretty
it's pretty simple. It's essentially just drawing a polygon around a certain location. So just drawing the polygon as your zone of where you want pedestrians or bicyclists to pass through. Drawing an arrow to draw the direction, so make sure it's aligned with the way the path is going. Either direction, north, south, east, west, whatever, and then setting it to make sure that people can pass through the location. And that's about it. And you run the analyses and you see what you get. So I'll add it's pretty easy to set up, but again, once you have everything set up, it's just a click of a button each time to run it again for whatever different types of periods or types you want.
So, do you have, oh, sorry, hi, this is Yamina. Do you have like cameras installed that are operated by a specific system in certain locations? And what system is that they're running on?
So, I guess 2 ways of answering that. What I was mentioning earlier, the eco counter is the hard counter that we use. We set it up at a location. We have one of them, and we set it up at a location. And it's I don't know the ins and outs of how it works, but it essentially counts how many people are passing by within a certain 3, 5, 6 foot distance. and then it's exporting that. And then Streetlight Data is not a, it's basically just using your phone through their system to obtain an understanding of how many people are passing through a certain area.
So Streetlight Data already has cameras installed in certain areas.
Streetlight Data isn't cameras. It's just the GPS on your phone.
Oh, GPS on your phone.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I guess I'm just trying to imagine how it would work with like people running by. In Los Angeles, California, we have something called the red light program, and what that is it works with police departments to track traffic through surveillance methodologies, and like at stop signs and people crossing the road and things like that at crosswalks and what have you. So with all of that said, I'm just wondering if this is similar to the red light program that they have available, or if this would ultimately turn into something like that.
It's definitely not. I wouldn't say it's similar to that. No. All Streetlight basically is it takes an aggregate amount of GPS data from several places. So every time you get a new app and it asks you to allow your location to be used, that app could be exporting their data to a vendor who then sells it to Streetlight for Streetlight's use. So it's all just it's all automated by Streetlight and automated from your phone. So there's nothing else that's really to it other than just your GPS data. Streetlight uses a bunch of algorithms to turn it into a data point. I think they have billions of data points that are millions of data points and analyses that are done. And they turn that into a data point that we then can use.
Yes, this is Steve. Are you able to manipulate that data so that way you can, if you know about particular episodic events, so say for the canal path, if there's a half marathon that's going and that's going to in a 1 day increase your data, especially if it's a turnaround point, say 300, 700 people or more usage, can you go in and remove that so it gives you a more clear understanding of the daily usage versus total usage?
So my understanding is that Streetlight would sort of filter that out. It could have a slight uptick. I don't know the exact ins and outs of how that would work, but they would essentially filter that out of the average. There are ways that we could add that in, such as using Calibrated Accounts to see how many people might have been going through a certain month, but I believe they more so filter that out than anything else. So it's not really something that we have to worry about. So there's no way essentially, so to say, for the data to be manipulated as such. I couldn't walk on a trail 10,000 times and it would manipulate the data, so to say.
All right, any other questions?
How are you going to recruit people to use this app?
So it's
idea?
So I think I talked about it a little bit earlier. It's not per se a recruitment of using this app. Because the best way to explain it would be it's just every time you opt in on your phone, not every time, but when you opt in on your phone to allow an app to use location services, that app is tracking your location. And what some apps do is they sell that data, they sell your location data to vendors who then would sell it to companies like Streetlight, who anonymously aggregate the data into data points that we then can use.
So Matt, this is Kirsten. As I understand it, then what that means is this is a passive system. Yes. We just identify it to the vendor where we want them to be looking for data. They aggregate that data for us. So the only folks that we're missing are the folks that are saying, no, don't allow the GPS to be used unless I have certain apps on.
Right,
so
exactly.
Yeah, so my question, Matt, along those lines is, do they have a, like when you have a counter for cars, right? You have an algorithm that you use to say there's like 2.3 people in each car, right? So you know that there's not 0.3 people in a car. But that gives us a sense of, some cars are super packed and some cars are single occupancy. How do they figure that into, or do you happen to know how they figure it into this passive app for folks that don't have their GPS turned on, so we wouldn't get that data for those individuals?
I would. I don't know specifically. However, I would make an argument that that is quite a small number comparatively to the people who do opt in. So I would not say that it would affect the data.
Okay.
They have various methods, and they might talk about it on their website, but they have various methods and algorithms that they use and other data points that they use to back up their data, to basically show that yes, this is accurate and our algorithm is able to analyze these sort of things. I believe it's Streetlight Data. You guys can search it up, and can also find a lot more information. They have plenty of white papers if you want to spend a few hours reading into how their algorithms work. That definitely explain it a lot better than I could.
Nope, that works fine. Thanks, Matt.
All right. If that's all the comments, we'll move along. Thank you, Matthew. Next item is 7D, update on the GWRC Greenway feasibility study. Ms. Farber.
Hello. Okay, so the folks that have been with us a while know that the GWRC is working on a Greenway feasibility study. Ian Ullis has started to work on this with us, and we've got it going again. Don't worry, I'm not summoning you, Ian. I'm just letting them know that you are helping us out with this study now. So I wanted to give you all a real update since we're getting going on this again. So next slide, please. So to date, just a review, we have completed the data for all existing and planned trails for the 5 jurisdictions, created maps for each jurisdiction and sent them off to those of you who are local planners, and you've given me your comments on that. We've reviewed them for accuracy. We've gotten a consultant, Berkeley Group, and we've engaged a facilitator for our meetings. We've identified the working group members, and we've set dates for meetings, which you guys have seen in your packet. Next slide, please. So there will be 3 working group meetings. Please set these on your calendars. April 29th at 6 p.m. will be our first virtual meeting. That will be composed of you guys and other trail advocates that we identify. The second meeting will be May 19th, again virtual. Again, BPAC, trail advocates, your department heads, VDOT, and some other applicable organizations. The last meeting, June 24th at 6 p.m. It's probably going to be virtual again, but we're leaving that to be determined for now. That one we will have elected officials, possibly tourism and economic development folks. One thing to note about meeting 2, May 19th, that is a Wednesday night, not a Thursday night. Next slide, please. So the first meeting, we'll introduce the folks to each other that don't know each other. It's mostly going to be you, but there will be other people. We're going to take a look at the maps and look at the network as a whole, think about connections and gaps. Now, I am going to be sending you all a packet well before this meeting, so you have a chance to review the map and take a look at everything beforehand. We're going to consider the linkage to the East Coast Greenway. We're going to look and see what our vision for this is. How is this going to fit with our comprehensive plans? How is this network going to come together at the borders of the localities? What is our vision? What are our challenges? And what are our goals and objectives? We're going to come out of this thinking about what our methodology is going to be, and we're going to develop that at our next meeting. Next slide. So our second meeting, May 19th, we are going to develop our methodology. This is going to be our draft methodology to prioritize our Greenway improvements. Do we want to, well, we want to develop a cohesive regional Greenway network. Some of our priorities might be connecting to the East Coast Greenway, closing gaps between existing trails, connecting to natural areas, historical areas, and our biggest thing is feasibility, of course. Now, a lot of this is probably going to be just taking a look at our planned trails and figuring out which ones to prioritize for funding as a region. So we're going to discuss adoption into county plans, the ones that aren't already there, and how we're going to go about public education and outreach. Next slide. The third meeting, June 24th, we will take the methodology that we've drafted, we'll run it by our elected officials and other decision makers, and we'll finalize our methodology, and out of it we will develop our prioritized list of improvements. That's probably going to take our whole meeting time, but if we have time, we'll discuss, we'll brainstorm funding sources for our list. Now, for all three of these meetings, we've engaged a professional facilitator, and she's pretty awesome. We had a good meeting with her today, and she's very excited about being part of the project, so I think she's going to help us out a lot. So, next slide. So, important points. The prioritized trail improvements will need to be in the CLRP, LRTP comp plans so that they will score favorably as SMART scale, HSIP, TA, and other funding program applications in the future. And a regional trail effort is a strong symbol of collaboration among our localities. And a George Washington Regional Greenway branding linking to the East Coast Greenway is an economic opportunity for the region, and that's something that we should be talking about. Next slide, if there is one. So any questions or comments, folks?
Hey, Carrie, this is Jacob with Spotsy. Hey, quick question. So some of these greenways that we've discussed in the past, like the Virginia Central, there are large portions of it that would be off-road, through a forest, might be considered as a greenway corridor. But as you know, we've had some instances where, due to development encroachment and a number of other issues, we've had to revise the route in some areas to result in bypass connections that would result in on-road trails or shared use paths along the side of the roads. Would those also qualify, those segments, as greenways underneath this plan?
Yes, absolutely. Greenways are not just natural trails, but they're also shared use paths.
All right, thank you.
Carrie, have we considered, this is Chris Clark, adding in the Potomac Heritage National Scenic Trail folks to this, and maybe having Ann O'Neill join us, who's the new superintendent?
Yeah, we should definitely bring them in, and they will probably be part of the second meeting.
Okay.
And if, of course, Park Service is Park Service. This is Kirsten. So if we have something that I can help with passing on to Ann or the Potomac Heritage Trail, it goes through the park here too. So we're all connected, not quite so isolated as we don't talk to each other. So if there's something, totally can help with that.
Yeah,
thank you.
It's just great that Ann's only about an hour away now.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Carrie, yes, in particular, this is Jim. I was going to suggest that at the meeting on May the 19th, where you indicate the East Coast Greenway, that you also add, as Chris and Kristen, I think we're suggesting that the Potomac Heritage Trail be added there. Coming through Stafford County, the East Coast Greenway and the Potomac Heritage Trail run pretty well parallel to each other. And then the Greenway, of course, continues on through Caroline where the Potomac Heritage Trail continues on east through King George.
Mm-hmm.
The holy grail for both of these trails, we recognize there's a lot of on-road aspects to these trails coming through our regions, but the holy grail for both of us is to try and get as much off-road as we can. I had a very nice discussion with our local coordinator of the East Coast Greenway, Miss Sanders, who was at our last meeting, and we had a nice discussion about that. So I would encourage adding the Potomac Heritage Trail in all of our discussions. So thank you.
Certainly. Any other questions, folks?
This is Yanina. Hi, Carrie. Hi, Miss Barber, or Carrie. I just took a walk with Miss Shelton from the Aquia District, Cindy Shelton, and we took a walk from one side of Stafford where Mary Washington Hospital was, all the way to, I think that was the Heritage area. It's a war memorial site right by the transit system, by the VRE in God, it's escaping me. It starts with a B. It's where the flooding is. And anyway, she was showing me the pathway, and I wanted to bring that to your attention on the board, and also loop in Cindy Shelton when I can, because she has some excellent ideas for this pathway that I think could turn into a great hiking trail that's currently being developed, and there are developers that want to build alongside it. So there's a lot of opportunity for that, and I don't know how this connects or correlates to the Potomac Heritage Trail or the Greenway pathway. You have to forgive me. I'm still learning the ropes here, so if I'm not completely spot on with all the words, take it easy on me. But I would like to chat privately about that and maybe connect the dots with both of you and see what can be done, because she has definitely expressed a huge interest in preserving the land and making a walking path and a bicycle path along that stretch from Stafford to the VRE. So anyway, I just thought I'd add that in there, and maybe we can chat offline. Thank you.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ms. Jordan, this is Brian with Stafford. So I've been speaking with Ms. Shelton on that trail and kind of leading that effort from the county side, but there are a couple developments there that are underway along Old Potomac Church Road, just south of Stafford Hospital, and they've offered trail easements for future trail development. Along the stream there's going to be new pump stations crossing the creek and then down to Civil War Park. And then the idea is to continue from there to Brook VRE Station. So I believe that's the section that you are referring to, but
yes,
definitely we'd like to have that incorporated. I think that would be a good one for the Potomac Heritage Trail, as it is a north-south corridor and more scenic in nature. So,
thank you for clarifying.
So if there are no more questions, then I'm all done.
All right, thank you. Move on to agenda item number 8, correspondence. Has there been any correspondence? Hearing none.
No, there is. I have this one link that I wanted to bring your attention to. So there is a lot going on right now, but I thought maybe if you had missed this, folks should know about it. If you can take a chance to take a look at this link, the General Assembly just passed this, where localities can now lower the speed limit, if they wish, down to 15 miles per hour. This bill was just passed during this year's General Assembly session. And this could be a great boon for pedestrians and cyclists in the area. So if this might be something you want to talk to your local leaders about. Is this something any of you have heard about yet?
I have not heard about this.
It's kind of a big deal, because before this, localities had no power to change their speed limits.
That's really interesting. Is there any data that supports that, Carrie? That's hugely interesting.
Yes.
Okay. Very good.
There's quite a lot of data that shows there's much more survivability from 25 miles per hour to 15 miles per hour for a pedestrian struck by a car.
Yeah, I'm sure. I would worry just a little bit, not that I'm paranoid, you understand, about making our motorist allies so angry that they will turn against everything else we do. I just worry about that.
Well, it's not something that would be done on every city street, but I think certain residential streets could benefit from it.
Yes, I'm sure. Yes.
So just something I wanted to bring everybody's attention to.
Hey, Carrie,
Great.
this is
Thank
Adam. I actually posted about this on Facebook, as you know, a couple days ago, and yesterday I had a beer with the city council member, and the first thing I did when he sat down with me, the first thing he said was 15 mile an hour speed limit is not going to work. So we have a little convincing to do if we're going to turn our elected officials onto our team about it. But I think it's a really good idea. It won't happen right away, but I think over time, people just get the impression they need to slow down, especially in residential neighborhoods and on urban streets in downtown.
Yeah, I clearly agree with you. So that's it for correspondence.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up is staff reports.
I have nothing for staff reports.
Mr. Chairman, there's also not very much to report. We are advertising for a new full-time planner position, but we'll report back on that in the future.
All right, thank you. Is that it for staff reports? If so, we can move on to member reports. Let's start off with Mr. Clark. King George, do you have anything to report?
Yes, March 16th, the Board of Supervisors in King George formally adopted the Trailways feasibility study that was completed by the Berkeley Group in 2018. It was remanded to them for some edits, and it never came back to the board. So we discovered that and corrected that this month, just 3 years later, which we've been using in our capital improvement plan and is part of the Greenway's plan as well. So we needed that adopted formally. The other thing is, in partnering with the Friends of the Dahlgren Trail, Jim Lynch and I were part of the group that hosted Ann O'Neill and Tomas Diza from National Park Service. They're helping the Friends of the Trail work on a master plan through the Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program. And so they were down in the last couple of weeks, and we toured almost all of the Dahlgren Railroad Heritage Trail, and it was a very good visit to have them with us, and they also met some of our elected officials, so it was a good visit. So That's all I have tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, City of Fredericksburg.
If you're referring to Jamie, I don't have any items to report out.
My apologies. Mr. Pastwick, Spotsylvania.
Yeah, just one quick update. County Transportation, myself, and Parks and Rec just met yesterday, as a matter of fact, to discuss a transportation alternatives project that we had funded to extend the Virginia Central rail trail from its current termination point at Salem Church Road up to the intersection of Harrison and Salem Church Road, where we have prior smart scale round to result in crosswalks and landings on sidewalks on the other side of the road. Wawa gas station was recently approved across the street. That's also going to construct a portion of the shared use path headed east towards the city of Fredericksburg with the VCR. We're in the process now of doing some preliminary analysis on locating the best connection points for that trail and where it's best located. The challenge with the Harrison Road Park site is it's partly a former landfill site that has struggled with settling issues over the years. So we're trying to avoid that area as much as possible. We'll have updates in the future. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Lasute, VDOT.
Trying to look at the meeting date, but I know we have a spring transportation meeting coming up. I think it's April 27th, but Adam or Carrie or Ian, if you can double check me and check in, that'd be much appreciated. But Stephen also wants to start holding some locality days, which is just a way to the different counties about smart scale, and this would be for round 5, which is still a long ways away, but we want to make sure that everyone's prepared with the type of information that needs to be collected, how to make successful applications, what's eligible, go over the criteria again. So we've not set those dates, but we will be before our next meeting. And I wanted to make everyone aware that we definitely would like participation at those meetings so that you can get the jump on how to make successful applications for smart scale. That's about it.
All right, thank you. Ms. Talkin Spalding, NPS.
I'll just speak to Lee Drive of late. Of course, we've had lots of increased recreational use along Lee Drive. If anybody has been on Lafayette, you know that things are moving forward, obviously, with the city and the roundabout that's happening. That will create that pedestrian bicycle crosswalk from the extension of the trail system into Lee Drive. I mention that because I want to give a shout out to VDOT. We have been having some significant issues with commercial traffic going on to Lee Drive, including semis that have gotten onto Lee Drive and then realized that commercial traffic was prohibited. If for those that may not know, on Park Service lands and Park Service controlled roads, commercial vehicles are generally not allowed, and they're certainly not allowed without a permit. VDOT did a great job. They helped us out putting some signs up that alerted commercial vehicle users that Lee Drive is not open, and so those were placed, I think, along like Lafayette and Lansdowne and that sort of thing, to keep them from turning onto Lee Drive to begin with. So just a really good partnership with VDOT to deal with an ongoing issue. So thanks to them for that.
All right, thank you. Lee Anderson, GW Ride Connect.
Hey, good evening. I have 2 parts, but I want to add, Kirsten, I cannot even imagine an 18-wheeler trying to go down Lee Drive. That just blew my mind.
I know, right? No, not only trying to go down Lee Drive, but then trying to turn around because they started down Lee Drive. It literally shut down traffic on Lee Drive for several hours as we assisted that individual for turning his rig around. It was interesting.
I believe
It
that.
it was not quite as bad as the Suez Canal, but it was mini Suez for a few minutes there.
Oh, goodness. Okay, so on to my actual report. First of all, I do want to take a minute to give a shout out to Jamie Jackson and the changes that are happening at Fredbus. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but they've been doing so much. They have new hours. They have a new app via their Route Shout. They have a new web page. I do want to spotlight their Transit Supporting Working Families initiative. That's all at Ride Fred. It's just, there's so much going on there. It's not the same old Fred, and I just wanted to point that out. Believe it or not, there's even more going on, like the Google trip planning and stuff. There's just so much going on over there. And then my next item is less of a report and more of a plea. GW Ride Connect is interested in starting participation in Bike to Work Day, May of 2022. I know that seems like a long ways away, but if any of you know of any entities that would be interested in participating in something like this, such as bike shops, bike clubs, individuals, businesses, please contact me. I'm going to put my email in the chat, and that is anderson@gwregion.org. Just shoot out an email if you know of anybody who'd be interested in promoting a Bike to Work Day. And that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Adam Lynch, Friends of the Rappahannock.
Okay, thank you. Just one thing to note. Yesterday, Governor Northam signed into law a bill that designated the lower Rappahannock from the Ferry Farm Bridge downstream for, I don't know, 150 miles, give or take, as a state scenic river. So one thing that touches the trail conversation is if you guys are putting in for any grants or other kind of land conservation, anything that involves that area of the river, you can include that aspect in your grant application. So I know like Spotsylvania has some ideas about doing some riverbank trails in the vicinity of the Bowman Center. So that is now a state scenic river, and if you guys are going in for grants, then definitely include that piece in your application. That's all for me.
Thank you. Deborah Foltz, Disability Resource Center. Hopefully your microphone's working now.
Yes, thank you. I don't have anything to report, thank you.
All right, Rob Maple, Fredericksburg Trails Alliance.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Just a few things. I had last two meetings ago talked about Quarry Trail sign project that we had won a grant for through IMBA. We're about 75% complete that. I don't know if you've seen those signs out there, anyone on the meeting here, but they have QR codes that give you where you're at, trail difficulties, and so forth. A lot of good feedback from that. Through a grant through the Duff Green Jr. Fund of the Community Foundation and a local business donation, we are now able to build a 2 stacked loop trail at Mott's Run this hopefully this summer around June-ish timeframe. It's about 2.5 miles of new natural surface trail. And then lastly, through a local business grant, we won the opportunity to purchase 2 new bike repair stations. I don't know if you've been to Sunshine Ballpark off Wicklow Drive and Fall Hill Avenue, but we installed a bike repair station last year there at Sunshine Ball Field. We are purchasing 2 more of those here in the near future. One to go at the entrance of Mott's Reservoir, and then another one is to be determined somewhere in the Quarry area. But nonetheless, some great assets for our local trails. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Jim Lynch, Potomac Heritage and Dahlgren Heritage Trail.
Yes, sir, Matthew, appreciate it. I've got a couple items. I had an exchange of emails with Brian Gouge about the alignment of the Belmont and Ferry Farm Trail. I'm roughly aware of it, but I wanted to get caught up a little bit because that is a part of the Potomac Heritage Trail, and I wanted to talk to Ann O'Neill, our new acting superintendent, who was here for a week or so ago. She was here. We had a real nice visit. We took her all up and down the railroad trail. We took her over to Caledon State Park, where we had a lunch there. It was really great to have her here. We hope that the next time she comes down, the Chatham Bridge will be complete, and we can carry her across over to look how the Potomac Heritage Trail goes through Fredericksburg. And Kristen, I hope on her next trip will be over the COVID, and hopefully we can have a lunch in town.
Totally agree,
so
Jim.
that would be great.
You.
Yes, indeed. We went over a number of, I won't call them issues, but a number of challenges that we have on the trail. I've got a list here. I'm going to email it to Matthew. One thing that Ms. O'Neill mentioned, that the National Park Service has an MOU with, it's one MOU, but it's signed by all of the jurisdictions in our region. Those MOUs have to be reviewed and modified if required every 5 years. She reminded me that the current MOU expires at the end of this year, 2021. So that's kind of an action item for all of us to take a look at that MOU to see if there's anything we want to tweak and change. I couldn't locate my copy, Mr. Mr. Googe, Brian, appreciate it a whole lot. Every time anything goes on, I lean on you, but he was instantly able to locate a copy of it and emailed it to me. But that should be an action item for us to begin looking at that, and hopefully have it re-upped by the end of the year. I think it expires in November. I had a discussion with Sarah Sanders with the East Coast Greenway, and we talked a little bit about the routes of both our paths, East Coast Greenway and Potomac Heritage Trail, through the region. I have one sort of interesting issue. As you know, our railroad trail, the Dalton Railroad Trail, is 15 miles long and 100 feet nominally wide. We have 130 neighbors. 129 of them are great. we have one who refuses to understand where the property lines are between the railroad trail and his lots. I don't know if Kristen, if you have any experience, or anybody else does, with how in the world you work with that. I'd be interested to hear anybody's experience with that. Right now he's threatening to carry us to court. Okay. So moving on from that, we are working with Caledon State Park to designate Potomac Heritage Trails through the park, the paths of the trail through the park. Mrs. Cox, the park manager, has a rough working draft of that. We've had two running events, one in the middle of February, in the middle of the ice storm. That was a lot of fun. And then we had another run a month later the annual Sheets to Sheets run, which was the weather was perfect, and we had a couple of our Ainsley's Angels wheelchair teams out there, which is all it's always really great to have our wheelchair participants out there on the trail. The Friends of the Dog and Railroad Trail, with a amount of money that had been willed to us, were able to complete a boardwalk across an area that, due to the recent rains, had turned into a swamp, just an absolute swamp. That our wheelchair athletes were able to get across the swamp and just raved about the boardwalk. And we're also planning, as I'm sure almost everybody else here, on a smart scale project. We have a quarter mile section along Caledon Road, Route 218, that connects the eastern end of Caledon State Park to the railroad trail. So we're going to be putting in for a smart scale application for that. So I think that about concludes everything I have to bring to the attention of the group. Thank you all so much. Anyone who would like to be on our mailing list for our newsletter, please let me know. Yamina, I think I've added you. I notice you're on there. So great. Okay. Hey, Matthew, appreciate it, buddy.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Stephen Littlewood, Stafford County, anything to report?
I don't as of yet. I'm collecting some data, and I'm trying to read through some of the plans that that have been discussed before in here, and then within other areas of the local government. Just looking potentially trying to connect the different routes, like Mine Road, all the walkways there around the Jeff Rouse Sports Complex, and see if there's plans to connect to the new Stafford Town Center that's being built. So that way we're not trying to figure that stuff out once the facility's built, and then trying to get traffic safely over there, foot traffic and bicycle traffic over there. But I have to do a lot more studying and inquiries before I bring anything official up.
All right, thank you. And finally, a staff report for Stafford County. Brian Gooch here. So I guess the big news in Stafford recently has been the board's adoption of new density requirements in the rural area. So new density requirements effectively cut lot yields in half for all the rural areas of Stafford. And while that doesn't directly impact bike ped facilities, what we expect it'll do is drive more development into the urban areas and potentially create some more demand for rezonings and whatnot, which in turn could lead to a lot of the trails envisioned in our bike ped plan being built by developers or proffered by developers. So that's a potential impact of that change, and that's all I had to report. And I believe we got everyone there. So with that, that was the last item on the agenda other than adjournment. There's a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I move we adjourn. This is Jim.
Lee Anderson, I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Good meeting. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.